Back on Earth, Daniel sat alone in his office, the weight of everything they had experienced pressing down on him like a physical force. The excavation site was gone, buried beneath layers of rock and ash. But the memories lingered, sharp, vivid, and unrelenting. He stared at the files scattered across his desk. Photographs, notes, fragments of data salvaged from their mission. Each piece told a story, yet none of them captured the full scope of what they had faced. Rachel had urged him to compile the records into a single document, a legacy for future generations. If we don't warn them, she had said, someone else will make the same mistakes. Her words haunted him now as he typed away, summarizing their findings in plain language. The artifact, the vault, Eric's, the creatures, it all seemed so surreal, even to him, and he had lived through it. As he worked, Laura's voice echoed in his mind. She had volunteered to stay behind, insisting that someone needed to ensure the explosives were set correctly. "I'll meet you at the ship," she had promised, her smile weak but determined. But when the dust settled, she wasn't there. They called for her, searched the perimeter, but found no trace. Daniel tried to convince himself she had escaped another way. But deep down, he knew the truth. She had stayed behind, for good. The guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. Had he pushed too hard? Been too curious? Too reckless? Every decision he had made led them closer to catastrophe, and though they had stopped the immediate threat, the cost had been devastating. By the time he finished the report, night had fallen. His computer screen cast a pale glow over the room as he saved the file under a simple name. Asterisk Lost Records from Fallen Empires Asterisk. It felt fitting, a title that carried both the mystery and the warning they had uncovered. But just as he leaned back in his chair, something caught his eye. A new window had opened on his screen without his input, displaying a string of coordinates blinking faintly against the black background. At first, he thought it was a glitch, but the numbers were precise, too deliberate to be random. And then he realized. It was another signal, identical to the one that had drawn them to the barren planet. His heart sank. They had destroyed the artifact, sealed the vault, sacrificed so much to stop the creatures. Yet here was proof that their work wasn't done. Somewhere else in the universe, another vault awaited. Another warning. Another potential disaster. For a moment, Daniel simply stared at the screen, frozen by the implications. Then, slowly, he reached for his phone. He hesitated before dialing Rachel's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Daniel," she asked. "What is it?" "I need you to come in," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" He glanced at the screen again, the blinking coordinates mocking him. Another signal, from somewhere else. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Rachel sighed. "How far away is it?" "Far," Daniel replied, "but close enough to matter." As he hung up, he turned off the monitor, plunging the room into darkness. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to sit in silence, the enormity of what lay ahead settling over him like a suffocating blanket. Humanity's curiosity had brought them this far, uncovering secrets meant to stay hidden. And now, whether he liked it or not, he was part of a cycle, one that might never truly end. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky, oblivious to the dangers lurking among the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human understanding, something waited. Something ancient, something hungry. And Daniel knew, with a chilling certainty, that the universe wasn't done testing them. Not by a long shot. "And they will," Daniel said firmly. "But not like this. Not until we're sure it's safe." They worked quickly, gathering every piece of evidence they could find and setting explosives throughout the cave. As they prepared to leave, Laura lingered near the pedestal, her hand resting on the artifact one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who or what she was apologizing to. The explosion rocked the entire site, collapsing the entrance and sealing the chamber forever. Standing outside, the team watched as clouds of dust rose into the sky, marking the end of their journey. They had survived, but none of them felt victorious. The weight of what they had uncovered and what they had sacrificed would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The creature moved faster than any of them could react, its form shifting and twisting unnaturally as it lunged toward the group. Daniel barely managed to dive out of the way, rolling to his feet just in time to see Kyle fire his weapon at the thing. The bullets passed through its shadowy body as if it were made of smoke, dissipating into nothingness. "It's not working," Kyle shouted, backing away as the creature turned its gaze on him. Laura grabbed a nearby rock and hurled it at the figure, hoping to distract it. The stone struck its chest, but instead of slowing down, the creature absorbed the impact, its oily surface rippling like water before reforming. It let out a low guttural laugh, the sound echoing through the chamber. "You cannot harm me," it sneered, its hollow eyes glowing brighter. "I am beyond your understanding." Rachel stepped forward, clutching her notebook tightly. "Wait," she called out, her voice trembling but determined. "If you're so powerful, why waste time with us? We're nothing compared to what lies beyond this planet. Isn't that where your kind belongs?" The creature paused, tilting its head slightly as if considering her words. For a moment, the tension in the room eased, but only for a moment. Then it smiled again, a cold, cruel expression that sent shivers down their spines. "You think to bargain with me?" it asked, its voice dripping with mockery. "Your lives mean nothing, but perhaps I will enjoy watching you squirm before the end." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Cracks formed along the walls of the chamber, glowing faintly as if illuminated from within. Laura noticed the symbols carved into the rock pulsing with the same rhythm as the artifact's glow. "The cave, it's reacting to it," she said urgently, pointing to the pedestal where the pot had been. The artifact hovered above it now, its light growing brighter with each passing second. Daniel's mind raced. If the artifact was amplifying the creature's power, then destroying it might weaken the thing, or at least buy them some time. But how? "We need to overload it," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If we can disrupt its energy, maybe we can trap it again." "How do we do that?" Kyle asked, still keeping his weapon trained on the creature despite knowing it was useless. "Use the equipment," Rachel replied quickly, pulling a small device from her bag. It was a portable energy scanner they had brought from the ship. "If we channel enough power into it, we might be able to create a feedback loop." Without hesitation, Laura ran to the pedestal, grabbing the artifact despite the icy chill that seeped into her hands. She held it close to the scanner, adjusting the settings as fast as she could. The others formed a protective circle around her, ready to fend off the creature if it attacked. "You fools," the creature hissed, advancing slowly. "You cannot contain me again. Your efforts are meaningless." But even as it spoke, the artifact's glow began to waver, flickering erratically as the scanner emitted a high-pitched whine. Sparks flew from the device, and the air grew thick with static electricity. The creature hesitated, its movements becoming sluggish as if struggling against an invisible force. "Now," Rachel yelled, pressing a button on the scanner. A burst of energy surged outward, engulfing the chamber in a blinding flash of light. When the brightness faded, the creature was gone, reduced to a puddle of black ooze that quickly evaporated into nothingness. The artifact lay motionless on the floor, its glow dimmed to a faint hum. The trembling stopped, and the symbols on the walls went dark. For a long moment, no one spoke. They stood there, catching their breath, staring at the aftermath of what had just happened. Finally, Kyle broke the silence. "Is it over?" he asked, lowering his weapon cautiously. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But we can't take any chances. This place is too dangerous to leave intact." Laura nodded, stepping toward the artifact. "We have to destroy it. All of it. Everything connected to this site needs to go." Rachel hesitated, glancing at her notes. What about the records? The data we've collected? Someone has to know what happened here. They gathered their gear and stepped outside, the cold wind biting at their faces. The artifact's glow was faint but unmistakable, pulsing in the distance like a beacon. It hovered just above the ground, moving slowly as if waiting for them to catch up. Each step they took filled them with unease, the barren landscape stretching endlessly around them, devoid of life, yet teeming with an oppressive energy. As they followed the artifact, strange occurrences continued to plague them. Their equipment malfunctioned sporadically, readings jumping between extremes. Shadows shifted unnaturally, even in the dim light of the twin suns. And then there were the whispers, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Do you hear that?" Laura asked, her voice barely audible. "Hear what?" Kyle muttered, scanning the horizon with his weapon drawn. "The voices," she whispered. "They're louder now." Daniel nodded grimly. "I hear them too. They're getting closer." Suddenly, the artifact stopped moving, hovering in place near the edge of a deep ravine. Its glow intensified, illuminating the jagged rocks below. As they approached cautiously, they noticed something etched into the cliffside, an enormous symbol identical to the ones on the artifact. Beneath it lay a narrow cave entrance, partially hidden by debris. "This wasn't here before," Rachel said, her voice tinged with awe. "It's showing us something," Daniel replied, stepping closer. "Something important." Without hesitation, Laura started down the slope, her focus fixed on the cave. The others followed reluctantly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they ventured inside. The air grew colder, heavier, and the walls of the cave were covered in the same glowing symbols they'd seen in the vault. At the end of the tunnel, they found another chamber, a smaller version of the vault. In its center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a single crystalline pod. Unlike the others they'd seen, this one was cracked, its surface oozing a black, oily substance. "Oh no," Laura whispered, backing away instinctively. "It's already started." Before anyone could react, the substance seeped onto the ground, pooling into a shapeless mass that began to rise and twist, forming limbs and features. Within moments, a grotesque figure emerged, its hollow eyes locking onto them with predatory intent. "You shouldn't have come," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear gripping him. "We sealed your kind away. You won't escape again." The creature smiled, a chilling, unnatural expression. "Sealing us away only delayed the inevitable. Your curiosity brought you here, and now you'll pay the price." As it lunged toward them, the team scrambled to defend themselves, knowing full well they might not survive what came next. The room fell silent, the absence of the artifact leaving a void that felt almost tangible. Laura sat on the floor, her breathing shallow and uneven, while Daniel and Kyle exchanged panicked looks. Rachel moved quickly to the table where the artifact had been, her hands hovering over the empty space as if she could somehow will it back into existence. "How is this possible?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "It was right here. We all saw it." Daniel clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. "It's not just gone. It's active. Whatever it is, it's doing this on purpose." Kyle grabbed a flashlight and began searching the lab, sweeping the beam across every corner. The shadows seemed darker than usual, swallowing the light as if resisting scrutiny. "We need to figure out where it went. And fast," he said, his tone urgent. "If it's connected to those things, we're in serious trouble." Laura finally managed to stand, though her legs wobbled beneath her. She clutched the edge of the table for support, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I think it wants us to follow it," she said softly. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, turning to face her. "I don't know how to explain it," Laura replied, shaking her head. "But when I touched it earlier, I felt something. A pull, like it was guiding me. And now it's gone, but I can still feel it. Out there. She pointed toward the entrance of the structure. Rachel frowned, stepping closer. You're saying it's leading us somewhere? Yes, Laura said, her voice firmer now. And I think we should go. No way, Kyle snapped, crossing his arms. This thing has already messed with us enough. Following it is a terrible idea. Then what do you suggest? Daniel shot back. Ignoring it. Pretending it doesn't exist. If Laura's right, and it's trying to show us something, we can't afford to turn our backs on it. He's right, Rachel added reluctantly. As much as I hate to admit it, we've seen what happens when we ignore these warnings. Maybe this is our chance to understand. After a tense moment of silence, Kyle sighed heavily. Fine, but if this goes sideways, don't say I didn't warn you. The journey back to the excavation site was quiet, each member of the team lost in their own thoughts. The weight of what they had done, and what they had left behind, hung over them like a storm cloud. Daniel sat in the cockpit, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, his mind replaying every moment in the vault. Laura sat nearby, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if trying to hold herself together. Kyle fiddled with the ship's controls, though there was nothing left to adjust. Rachel, seated at the back, scribbled furiously in a notebook, documenting everything she could remember about Erix and the creatures. When they finally landed, the sight of the artifact greeted them like an unwelcome reminder. It still glowed faintly on the table in the lab, its symbols pulsing as if aware of their return. Laura approached it cautiously, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the surface. The whispers came again, softer this time, but no less unsettling. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, stepping closer. "It's been doing that since we got here. Like it's trying to tell us something." Rachel joined them, her face pale. "Maybe it's not just a warning anymore. Maybe it's reaching out." Kyle snorted, leaning against the doorway. "Great, so now it's haunted too." "No," Laura said sharply, her eyes fixed on the artifact. "It's more than that. I think it's connected to the vault, to Erix. Maybe even to those things we locked away." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If the artifact was truly linked to the vault, then sealing it might not have been enough. What if the connection between the two was stronger than they realized? What if the creatures could still reach them? "We need to destroy it," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. "If it's connected, then keeping it intact is too dangerous." "But we don't know how," Laura countered, her voice rising with frustration. "What if destroying it makes things worse? What if it wakes them up again?" "She's right," Rachel interjected, closing her notebook with a snap. "We can't act rashly. We need to study it, understand how it works before we do anything drastic. And what if we run out of time?" Daniel shot back, his patience wearing thin. "Every second we wait is another second those things might find a way back." The tension in the room grew palpable, each of them clinging to their own fears and doubts. Outside, the wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it an eerie sense of foreboding. None of them noticed the faint vibrations running through the ground, or the subtle changes in the artifact's glow. That night, strange things began to happen. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, readings fluctuated wildly, and shadows seemed to move when no one was looking. Laura stayed in the lab, unable to sleep, her eyes glued to the artifact. She swore she saw the symbols shift, rearranging themselves into new patterns. When she called out to the others, they dismissed her concerns, chalking it up to exhaustion. But then Kyle heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from somewhere deep within the structure. He grabbed his weapon and ran outside, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Back in the lab, the artifact's glow intensified, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. Laura felt a cold breath on the back of her neck, though no one was there. Her fingers hovered over the artifact, trembling as she whispered, "What do you want?" The response came not in words, but in images, flashes of the vault, of Eric's, of the creatures breaking free. Laura stumbled back, clutching her head as the visions overwhelmed her. By the time Daniel and the others rushed in, she was on the floor, muttering incoherently. "What happened?" Daniel demanded, kneeling beside her. "They're coming," Laura whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "They know we're here." The lights flickered violently, plunging the lab into darkness. When they came back on, the artifact was gone. The chamber erupted into chaos as the creatures surged forward, their movements unnatural and erratic. They didn't walk so much as glide, their forms shifting and distorting with every step. Their glowing eyes locked onto the team, filled with a hunger that sent chills down everyone's spines. Eric stepped in front of them, raising its arms to create a shimmering barrier of light. The creatures slammed against it, snarling and clawing, but the shield held. "For now, stay behind me," Eric's commanded, its voice booming over the cacophony. "You must seal the vault while I hold them off." Daniel glanced at the others, his heart pounding. Laura was already moving toward the control panel near the entrance, her hands trembling as she scanned the unfamiliar interface. Rachel followed close behind, trying to make sense of the symbols etched into the surface. Kyle stood near the edge of the battle, his weapon trained on the creatures, though he knew bullets wouldn't do much against beings like these. "How do we seal it?" Daniel shouted, his voice barely audible over the screeches of the attackers. "There." Laura pointed to a series of glowing runes embedded in the wall. "If we activate those, it should trigger the locking mechanism, but we'll need to synchronize them. Activate them all at once." "We don't have time for this." Kyle snapped, firing a shot at one of the creatures as it lunged toward them. The bullet passed harmlessly through its translucent form, dissipating into nothingness. "They're breaking through." Eric's barrier flickered, cracks forming along its surface as the creatures redoubled their efforts. The Guardian turned slightly, its expression grim. "Do not falter," it said. "Failure means extinction, for your kind and countless others." Rachel grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him toward the nearest rune. "We'll split up. Each of us takes one. On my mark, we activate them together." The team nodded, spreading out to their assigned positions. The creatures howled in fury, sensing what they were about to do. One of them broke free from Eric's weakening barrier, lunging toward Kyle. He barely managed to dive out of the way, rolling to his feet as the creature dissolved into smoke and reformed just inches away. "Hurry," Kyle yelled, backing away as the thing advanced. Laura reached her rune first, her fingers hovering over the glowing symbol. "Ready," she called out. "Me too," Rachel added, her voice shaking as she positioned herself at her station. Daniel hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting between the battle and the rune in front of him. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The lives of his team, the fate of humanity, all resting on this one action. Finally, he placed his hand on the symbol, feeling its warmth pulse beneath his palm. "Now," Rachel shouted. All three pressed down simultaneously. The runes flared brightly, sending waves of energy rippling across the chamber. The creatures screamed in agony, their forms dissolving into streams of black smoke that were sucked back into their pods. The doors began to close, sealing the vault with a deafening groan. But as the last pod sealed shut, Eric's turned to face them, its expression somber. "This is where we part ways," it said. "I must remain here to ensure the lock holds. My strength will fade over time, but I will endure as long as I am needed." "No," Daniel protested, stepping forward. "You helped us. You saved us. You don't have to stay." Eric shook its head. "It is my purpose. To leave would be to abandon my duty. Go now, mortals. Warn your people of what lies beyond. Do not let curiosity lead you astray again." The team didn't argue further. They knew there was no changing Eric's mind. As the barrier faded completely, they ran toward the exit, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Behind them, the massive door slid shut with a final, resounding boom. Outside, the planet seemed eerier than before, the dying sun casting long shadows over the barren landscape. No one spoke as they boarded the ship, their minds heavy with what they had witnessed and what they had lost. As they lifted off, Daniel stared out the window, watching the structure shrink into the distance. He felt a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing they had done the right thing, but also knowing the cost. Whatever secrets the universe held, some were better left buried. The figure stepped out of the pod, its movements fluid and deliberate. It was tall, taller than any human, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal under the faint glow of the chamber. Its eyes burned with an intense light, piercing through the dimness as it surveyed the intruders. For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy that made it hard to breathe. "I am Irix," the being said, its voice deep and resonant, as if it carried the weight of countless ages. "Guardian of this vault. You were warned not to awaken what sleeps." Daniel swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet Irix's gaze. "We didn't mean to disturb you," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "We only wanted answers. We found artifacts, warnings from civilizations long gone. We thought they might lead us here, to understand." Irix tilted its head, studying him with an unreadable expression. "You sought knowledge, but knowledge is not always a gift. Tell me, mortal, do you truly wish to know what lies beyond your understanding?" Rachel stepped forward cautiously, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We didn't come here to harm anyone. We're explorers, scientists. If there's danger, we need to know so we can protect ourselves and others." Irix's glowing eyes flickered toward her, then back to Daniel. "Danger? Yes, there is danger. The beings you see here are not like me. They are predators, ancient and relentless. Once awakened, they consume everything in their path: life, light, even time itself." Kyle shifted uncomfortably, gripping his weapon tighter. "Why are they here? Why lock them away?" "They were defeated," Irix replied simply, "by those who came before you. Civilizations far greater than yours fought to contain them, sacrificing everything to ensure their slumber would remain unbroken. And yet here you stand, undoing their work." Daniel felt a wave of guilt crash over him. He had been so focused on discovery, on uncovering the secrets of the universe, that he hadn't stopped to consider the consequences. Now, faced with the reality of what they had unleashed, he realized how reckless they had been. "Can we fix this?" Laura asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. She had stayed quiet until now, but her words carried a desperate urgency. "Can we seal the vault again?" Irix paused, considering her question. "Perhaps," it said finally, "but the process will require great sacrifice, and time is short. Already, I sense unrest among the others. Their awakening cannot be undone." As if on cue, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Several of the pods began to crack, their surfaces splitting apart as the figures inside stirred. One by one, they opened their eyes, glowing with the same eerie light as Irix. But where Irix's presence was commanding and regal, theirs radiated malice, a cold, suffocating hatred that sent shivers down everyone's spines. "We have to leave," Kyle said sharply, stepping back toward the entrance. "Now." "No," Daniel countered, his voice firm despite the fear clawing at his chest. "If we run, we'll just bring this back to Earth. We need to stop them here." Irix nodded slowly, as if approving of Daniel's resolve. "Very well. I will aid you, but know this. Sealing the vault will trap us all within. Those who stay must give themselves willingly to the task." The team exchanged uneasy glances. The gravity of the situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. They had come seeking answers, but now they faced a choice: flee and risk unleashing unspeakable horrors, or stay and fight, knowing they might never leave. Laura stepped forward first, her jaw set with determination. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "This is my fault too. I helped bring us here. I'll help make it right." Daniel stared at her, torn between admiration and despair. Before he could respond, Rachel spoke up. "Me too. Someone needs to document this, to warn others, if we fail." One by one, the others followed, each volunteering for reasons of their own. Only Kyle hesitated, his grip tightening on his weapon. "There has to be another way," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "There isn't," Eric said, its tone final. "The decision is made. Prepare yourselves. The battle begins soon." As the team readied themselves, the glowing figures emerged fully from their pods, their forms shifting and twisting unnaturally. The air grew colder, darker, as if the very life was being drained from the room. Eric stood at the forefront, its body radiating a protective barrier. And then, without warning, the creatures attacked. The ship touched down on the barren planet with a soft thud, kicking up clouds of gray ash that swirled around the landing struts. The air outside was thin and cold, carrying an eerie stillness that made the team uneasy. Daniel, Kyle, and Rachel suited up in their environmental gear, checking their equipment one last time before stepping onto the surface. Each of them felt the weight of where they were standing. A dead world, untouched by life for countless centuries. As they approached the massive structure, its scale became even more apparent. It towered above them like a forgotten monument, its dark surface etched with intricate patterns that glowed faintly under the dim light of the dying sun. The symbols were unmistakable, identical to those on the artifact they had discovered back at the excavation site. But here, they were larger, sharper, as if freshly carved. "This place, it's ancient," Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly through the comms. "But it doesn't feel abandoned." Daniel nodded, though his eyes were fixed on the entrance. The warning message loomed over them, etched into the stone in bold, jagged lines. Asterisk, "Do not awaken what sleeps." Asterisk, he hesitated, staring at the words as if they might shift or change. There was something about the way they were written, not just as a caution, but as a plea, a desperate cry from the past. "We should go inside," Kyle said, breaking the silence. His tone was steady, but his hand hovered near the weapon strapped to his side. Even he, the most practical member of the team, seemed to sense the unease hanging over them. "No," Rachel replied sharply. "We can't just barge in. This isn't some archaeological dig. It's a tomb. Or worse." Daniel turned to her, his expression resolute. "If we came all this way, we have to see it through. We've already triggered whatever this is. Turning back now won't change anything." Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but she stopped herself. She knew Daniel was right. They had crossed a line the moment they followed the signal. Whatever secrets this place held, they couldn't unlearn them now. The entrance was sealed with a heavy door, its surface covered in the same glowing symbols. Kyle examined it closely, running scans with his handheld device. "It's locked," he said after a moment. "But there's some kind of mechanism here, if we can figure out how it works." Daniel stepped forward, his gloved hand brushing against the carvings. As soon as he touched them, the symbols flared brighter, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern. The ground beneath their feet vibrated faintly, and a low hum filled the air. For a brief moment, Daniel thought he heard whispers again, soft, indistinct voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. "Did you hear that?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with fear. "Yes," Daniel admitted, though he didn't look away from the door. The symbols continued to glow, shifting and rearranging themselves until they formed a new pattern. A seam appeared along the edge of the door, splitting open with a deep, grinding sound. Inside, the structure was vast and cavernous, lit by the same faint glow that radiated from the walls. Rows of crystalline pods lined the chamber, each containing humanoid figures suspended in stasis. Their faces were serene, almost peaceful, but there was something unnatural about them. their skin translucent, their forms too perfect to be human. "What are they?" Kyle whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Daniel said, stepping closer. He reached out instinctively, drawn to one of the pods. Inside, the figure stirred ever so slightly, its eyes flickering beneath closed lids. Rachel grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Don't touch it," she hissed. "We don't know what will happen." But it was too late. The movement triggered something. One of the pods began to crack, its surface splitting apart with a sharp metallic sound. The figure inside slowly opened its eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light. It sat up, its gaze locking onto Daniel. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" it asked, its voice resonating through the chamber like thunder. The team froze, their breaths caught in their throats. Whatever this being was, it wasn't human, and it wasn't happy to see them. The next morning, Kyle was the first to notice something unusual. While reviewing the energy readings from the previous night, he spotted a pattern that didn't make sense. It wasn't just random fluctuations. It was a signal, a faint, rhythmic pulse coming from deep space. He called Daniel and Laura into the lab, his face pale but excited. "Look at this," Kyle said, pointing to the screen. "It's not coming from the artifact itself. It's external. Something out there is broadcasting." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "Can you trace it?" Kyle nodded. "It's weak, but I can try. If we boost the range on our scanners, we might be able to pinpoint its origin." Laura crossed her arms, her expression uneasy. "What if it's connected to the artifact? What if we're not supposed to follow it?" Daniel hesitated. He knew she had a point. Everything about this discovery felt dangerous, like they were playing with forces they didn't fully understand. But curiosity burned inside him, an insatiable need to know more. "We came here to learn," he said finally. "If this signal leads us to answers, we owe it to ourselves, and to humanity, to investigate." After hours of fine-tuning their equipment, Kyle managed to isolate the signal source. It was coming from a distant star system, far beyond the reach of any human exploration so far. The coordinates placed it near a dying sun, surrounded by cosmic dust and debris. The location was barren and lifeless, or so it seemed. "We'll need to go there," Daniel said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in the room. Rachel joined the discussion via hologram, her expression skeptical. "You're talking about leaving the site unprotected. What if the artifact reacts again while you're gone? Or worse, what if whatever sent that signal knows you're coming?" "It's a risk we have to take," Daniel replied. "If this signal is tied to the artifact, it could hold the key to understanding the warnings. We can't ignore it." The team debated for hours, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. In the end, curiosity won out. They decided to prepare a small vessel for the journey, taking only the essentials. Laura volunteered to stay behind, insisting that someone needed to monitor the artifact. Daniel respected her decision, though he couldn't help feeling a pang of guilt about leaving her alone. As they prepared to depart, Laura pulled Daniel aside. "Be careful," she said, her voice low. "This feels wrong, like we're being drawn in deliberately." "I know," Daniel admitted, "but we don't have a choice. If we turn back now, we'll never know the truth." The journey through space was tense and silent. Kyle manned the controls, his fingers flying over the console as he navigated the ship through fields of debris. Rachel stayed in contact via communication relays, offering advice and warnings whenever possible. Daniel sat in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The closer they got to the signal's origin, the heavier the air seemed to grow, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. When they finally arrived, the sight before them was breathtaking. The dying sun cast an eerie red glow over the surrounding planets, bathing everything in shadow. At the heart of the system lay a single desolate world, a barren planet covered in jagged mountains and vast plains of ash. And there, nestled in a crater, stood a massive structure unlike anything they had ever seen. "What is that?" Kyle whispered, his voice filled with awe. Daniel stared at the image on the screen, his heart pounding. The structure resembled a fortress, its surface etched with the same symbols as the artifact. But there was no mistaking the message carved into its entrance: "Do not awaken what sleeps." For a moment, no one spoke. The warning was clear, undeniable. Yet, even as fear gripped them, Daniel felt a strange pull, a compulsion to move forward, to uncover what lay hidden within. "Let's land," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm of doubt swirling inside him. As the ship descended toward the surface, the signal grew stronger, almost deafening in its intensity. Whatever awaited them on that dead world, it was alive and watching. The next morning, Daniel and Laura gathered the team to share what they had learned. Rachel Meyer joined them via a holographic screen, her expression serious as she reviewed the images of the artifact. She pointed to specific symbols that matched those found on other planets, explaining how each civilization had left behind similar warnings before disappearing without explanation. "These aren't just random messages," Rachel said. "They're deliberate, almost like instructions, or maybe a plea." "A plea for what?" Kyle Dawson asked, leaning forward. As the team's engineer, he was more comfortable with machines than ancient languages, but even he could sense the gravity of the situation. "To leave something alone," Laura replied softly. "Every empire that discovered these artifacts ignored the warning. And now they're gone." Daniel nodded, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something monumental. The pieces of the artifact seemed to hum faintly when touched, as if alive in some way. It wasn't just metal or stone. It was something else entirely. Something unnatural. As the discussion continued, Kyle noticed something strange about the equipment readings. The energy levels around the site were fluctuating, far beyond what could be explained by natural causes. When he mentioned it, the room fell silent. Could it be the artifact? Laura asked, glancing at the fragments spread across the table. "It's possible," Kyle admitted, "but we need to run more tests. Whatever this thing is, it's affecting our gear in ways I've never seen before." That evening, Daniel stayed late in the lab, determined to piece together more of the artifact. Laura joined him, her curiosity outweighing her growing unease. Together, they managed to align several fragments, revealing a larger section of the mysterious script. The glowing symbols pulsed faintly, almost rhythmically, as if responding to their efforts. "Do you think it's trying to communicate?" Laura whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the equipment. Daniel hesitated. "I don't know, but if it is, we need to figure out what it's saying." Hours passed, and the two worked tirelessly, piecing together more fragments and cross-referencing them with data from previous discoveries. Just as fatigue began to set in, a sudden spike in energy readings startled them both. The lights flickered, and the hum grew louder, resonating through the walls of the lab. "What's happening?" Laura asked, her voice tinged with panic. "I don't." Daniel started, but his words were cut off as the artifact's glow intensified. For a brief moment, the symbols seemed to shift, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Then, just as suddenly, everything went still. Kyle burst into the lab moments later, his face pale. "Did you feel that?" The entire site lit up on the sensors. "It's like something activated." Daniel and Laura exchanged worried glances. Whatever they had uncovered, it was far more complex and potentially dangerous than they had anticipated. "We need to tell Rachel," Laura said finally. "She needs to see this." Rachel listened intently as they explained what had happened, her brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When they finished, she sighed heavily. "This changes everything. If the artifact is reacting to your presence, then it's not just a relic. It's active. And whatever it's connected to, we might have already triggered it." The weight of her words settled over the group like a shadow. Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. They had come here seeking knowledge, answers to questions humanity had pondered for centuries. But now, it seemed they might have awakened something far older and far more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. As the others prepared to secure the site for the night, Daniel lingered in the lab, staring at the artifact. Its faint glow pulsed steadily, almost hypnotically. He reached out, his fingers brushing against its surface. For a fleeting moment, he thought he heard whispers again, soft, indistinct, yet undeniably real. "Daniel," Laura called from the doorway. "We should go." He nodded, pulling his hand back reluctantly. As they left the lab, the artifact remained on the table, its light casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, plunging the barren landscape into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, the wind howled, a sound that, for the first time, felt less like nature and more like a warning. Daniel Carter stood at the edge of the excavation site, his boots sinking slightly into the soft red soil. The air was thin here, and the twin suns above cast long shadows over the jagged landscape. Behind him, a team of researchers worked tirelessly, brushing away layers of dirt and rock to uncover what lay beneath. Laura Bennett knelt nearby, her gloved hands carefully tracing the outline of an object half buried in the ground. Her face lit up with excitement as she called out to Daniel. "Daniel, you need to see this," she said, her voice tinged with awe. He hurried over, crouching beside her. What he saw made his breath catch. It was a piece of metal, or something like it, etched with intricate patterns that glowed faintly under the sunlight. The design was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a mix of sharp angles and flowing curves that seemed almost alive. But what caught his attention most were the symbols carved into its surface. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, a language. "Do you recognize it?" Laura asked, her eyes wide behind her visor. Daniel shook his head. "No, but it's not natural. This is too precise, too deliberate. Someone, or something, made this." The artifact was just the beginning. As the team dug deeper, more pieces emerged, scattered across the site. Each fragment bore similar markings, though some were worn down by time or buried under layers of sediment. By the end of the day, they had collected enough to start piecing them together like a puzzle. Back inside their portable lab, Daniel and Laura spread the fragments across a table, arranging and rearranging them until a clearer picture began to form. "This can't be coincidence," Laura murmured, pointing to a recurring sequence of symbols. "These same patterns appear on artifacts we found on other planets, completely different civilizations, yet they all share this warning." "A warning?" Daniel leaned closer, studying the symbols. "What does it say?" Laura hesitated. It's hard to translate without context, but it seems to repeat the same phrase. "Do not awaken what sleeps." Daniel frowned. The words sent a chill down his spine, though he couldn't explain why. He had spent years studying ancient cultures, deciphering forgotten languages, but this felt different. There was an urgency to the message, a weight that pressed heavily on his chest. He glanced at Laura, who looked equally unsettled. "We should contact Rachel," he said finally. "She might know more about these civilizations." Rachel Meyer was a historian specializing in extinct societies. When Daniel sent her images of the artifact, she responded within minutes, her tone grave. "I've seen this before," she wrote. "Every empire that left behind records like these vanished suddenly. No wars, no plagues, just gone." Her words hung in the air as Daniel and Laura exchanged uneasy glances. Something about the artifact felt wrong, as if it carried a secret too dangerous to uncover. Yet, despite the unease gnawing at him, Daniel couldn't look away. The symbols seemed to pull at him, urging him to dig deeper, to understand. That night, as the rest of the team slept, Daniel stayed up, poring over the fragments. His fingers hovered over the glowing patterns, tracing their shapes as if trying to memorize them. For a brief moment, he thought he heard something, a whisper, faint and distant, like wind brushing against his ears. He froze, heart pounding, But when he turned around, the lab was empty. Shaking off the feeling, he returned to his work. Whatever this artifact was, it wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a key, a clue to something far greater, and possibly far darker, than anyone could imagine. And Daniel knew, deep down, that he wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth.